Welcome to the Church Planters Experience. If you find value in these conversations, please share them with others.
So I'm in the area for a meeting with some other brothers in the church, and broader church networks brought me to the area to have a planning meeting for Kingdom Fellowship Weekend.
Okay. So for people that don't know what Kingdom Fellowship Weekend...
Yeah. Kingdom Fellowship Weekend has become quite a large gathering of Christians, as you know.
Large, like how many people?
So this year we're going to be maxing out the facilities that we're using, Roxbury Holiness Camp, and that'll be over 1,000 people.
Oh, wow.
So
That's pretty good. That's pretty good size.
yeah, worth some intentional efforts and organization. Yeah.
Yeah, so gathering of the faithful. And what's your role in that? Are you a board member or what's...
Yeah, I'm not a board member, but I am wanting to be willing to serve in some capacity, and I'm serving currently as an assistant to the planning and execution of the small group time for the men.
Okay.
Small group time would include prayer and personal prayer requests and sharing of that nature throughout the weekend. I think there's 3 scheduled times that we share together in that way.
So you are from Pittsburgh, and the church out there is fairly young. Exactly how young is it?
That's a great question, to which you'd probably have a better answer. I know I joined the church after my wife and I got married, and I was told that it had been in existence for about a year, so it took a lot of faith.
So that made you get married, what?
So we got married in the fall of 2022.
Fall of 20, yeah. So I think that would be accurate, that they would have started in the fall of 2021. So
Okay, yeah.
Perfect. So did you move there as soon as you got married?
Yeah, that was the plan. Once we were engaged, my wife and I were thinking and praying about where we might move and what we might do with our lives and our young and new love, as it were. And we decided through different events that we'd move to Pittsburgh. And so that was something we started to plan towards, obviously, as we chose to get married and everything.
So how in the world did you choose Pittsburgh? I mean, like, why Pittsburgh?
Yeah,
like,
so
you had a lot. I mean, okay, so you're from Ohio, right?
Yeah.
No, you're from North Carolina.
Technically I'm from New Hampshire, but...
Okay, wait a minute. Why don't we go ahead and cover that base once?
Yeah, so I was born in New Hampshire.
Born in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
None of that at all.
Yes, I was 1 year old in 2001, myself being born in 2000, when we moved as a family with my parents and 5 older siblings. And in 2001, we moved to North Carolina, where we joined Anabaptist Church. The name of that church was Cleveland Believers Fellowship. It was a young church at that time, and there was a lot of people moving in to help start that church, I guess. So
Wow.
We were one of them.
And so your parents were not Anabaptists in New Hampshire?
They were not, no.
And they moved to North Carolina
Yep.
to join a fledgling
Anabaptist church, plant.
And it was new church.
Yeah, it was brand new. Yeah, wow. I think maybe 98, so maybe barely a couple years, but not even. A year and a half maybe, so.
Okay, and then they drug you to Ohio later sometime?
Yeah, so I spent my whole childhood pretty much in North Carolina, from 2001.
At the same church?
Yeah, so, at the same church till the church divided for the reason of their size, going in 3 different directions.
So they just got too big and they split up into 3 churches?
Essentially. But then after a few years had elapsed, after the church kind of split there for size, it became obvious that there was like different stripes and colors and directions and emphases. And so my dad, or parents as it were, they decided to go with one of the different ones, and we began traveling a little further to the church that we preferred. So Yeah, but in 2018 we moved to Ohio, and yeah, I don't really like changing churches.
So where did you move to in Ohio?
In Ohio, we moved to a church where my parents knew the elder and pastor there, and were introduced through his teaching to the church, and they were looking for a church and something new, I guess. I don't know.
And what kind of, was it similar kind of church, different church?
It was a similar kind of church, yeah. Yeah, there was some things that transpired through that whole time, and our family culture was certainly at different times less than desirable with the struggles of children growing up. And yeah, there was definitely challenges, and I think God used those challenges in our family and in our relationship to the church and their relationship to us to, I think it was in bettering situation, but in the middle of conflict and potential struggle, it doesn't feel very nice, obviously. I don't know if you've ever experienced stuff like that, but
Yeah, that happens. So
yeah.
did you grow, I mean, like what was your occupation growing up?
Growing up.
I mean, I don't know if you had one, but your father's occupation.
Yeah. So my father, so jack of all trades,
Okay.
master of none. He has a lot of skills, but one of the things he did a lot of was he ran a roofing crew for a while. So I remember being quite young, 10 years old, screwing down metal on a roof and hoping I wouldn't fall off. And yeah, so definitely construction. And he also had a cleaning service at one time, cleaning residential carpets. And he has a lot of experience in auto body and paint finishes for cars.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, I mainly was influenced through his construction experience. So then one of the interests I developed as a young teen was farming, believe it or not. So I did quite a few, or two internships with different farmers. And
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So you went and farmed for a while?
Well, not commercially for myself personally,
Right,
but as an interest, yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah, I worked for 2 years at a commercial dairy. So yeah.
And that was in North Carolina or Ohio?
Yeah, in North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah. When my family moved to Ohio, I was ready for a more serious job, and so it was something I pursued right away. I actually had a job lined up before we even officially moved to Ohio.
What was that job?
There I was doing kind of a blend of two worlds, I guess, construction and somewhat ag, but I was doing ag fencing.
Okay.
For just just a while, and then I did commercial roofing for a while, and eventually got hired by my brother. So,
And your brother does what?
my brother does residential fencing. So,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. So you made a loop there.
yeah, I did. Yeah,
And your wife is always been from Pennsylvania?
yeah, she's always been from Pennsylvania. Born and raised in a county fairly close to here, and
Okay.
yeah.
And so then when you got married, you decided to just leave Ohio,
Yeah,
meet in the middle.
meet in the middle. Yeah.
Like,
No, it wasn't.
So why Pittsburgh? That's
Yeah, why Pittsburgh? Well, that's in the middle.
okay.
So our two families are
yeah.
about 3 hours from us in both directions, one west.
So how big a factor was it being in the middle?
Well, I think we mainly just joke about it because it seems convenient that
Mm-hmm.
it is that way, and to all the couples that have conflicts in their marriage, we kind of speak a little bit into their conflict
Right.
and tension.
Gotcha.
But it wasn't actually a huge contributing factor for us necessarily that it had to be fair. But yeah, I mean, my wife was the first one to have the idea, like, yeah, we should move to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I'll just say that here.
All right.
So yeah, I think she probably planted the first seed of faith, and we definitely needed something. I was not feeling peace to just kind of settle into normalcy with the job I had. I was already putting in my notice to quit working for my brother. And so I felt like there was just a season of things shifting around, and A lot of stuff potentially going to change, and obviously we're getting married, and so it felt like there was just a whole season of change, and we were just trying to, mind the Spirit, honestly, through it all. And I guess, honestly, the way I felt is there wasn't a pertinent place for us in the church where we were at.
Okay, what? I mean, like, it was a big church?
It was a decently sized church with 10 or 12 families.
Okay.
On a good
Not
day.
Big, but
Not huge,
nice
but
size.
definitely established. And we definitely had a desire to be a part of something that was going to engage us better.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. Wow. So you're what? I guess you were born in 2000, so and you're make you 25 now.
Yeah, I'm 25.
So when you moved to Pittsburgh, you were 23, 22.
Yeah.
So 22 how 22 years old, just married,
Yeah.
and moving to Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that sound crazy to you?
I mean, depends on your perspective, I guess.
Okay.
So my parents obviously have done a number of crazy things themselves, and those stories are pretty much stories to me as the second generation coming on. But it didn't feel like something that was so amazing to me. I don't know. Sometimes in life you kind of experience things and then you later look back and realize that it had to have been God's strength helping you through that time, because hindsight's 20/20, so you can kind of see what happened better sometimes.
Yeah, right. I mean, definitely from my point of view, it looks fairly radical just to get married and move straight to a decent sized city. Mm-hmm. You've never lived in the city before.
No. I'm definitely. So when I was planning to move to Pittsburgh, I was in a season of about 5 to 6 months, or not even actually, probably more like 4 months in that period of time before we moved, and I was like selling everything I had pretty much. I sold my my good truck and a couple good trailers and a lot of other stuff.
And so you're just going to go sell all that you have, and
Yeah, well, I didn't quite sell everything I had, but one thing that was nice is I was also in this whole vision of moving to Pittsburgh, getting married, and so that was a little bit of joy for the journey. So, and obviously, I'm sure you're realizing that that'll get a man off the couch and get him busy.
It will. I mean, but that's really interesting that your wife had the idea first, because I mean, almost, I'm going to say 75 to 80% of the time, it's the other way around. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I should just clarify that. I mean, I say that she mentioned it first. I would just say that we were both definitely seeking the Lord as to what His guidance would be. I just don't think I had really had the idea. So
what were some other places that you considered? Like, did you consider other?
Well, we had been considering like potential a stint of full-time ministry with different organizations.
Okay.
In the Anabaptist world.
So you were considering something like a mission.
Well, real life. Yeah, a full-time ministry opportunity, like a mission where we could have like an internship. Yeah, that's what we were interested in.
Instead, you decided to go live somewhere.
Yeah. In hindsight, I'll just share that it seems as if, though, like when you're young and zealous, you think you're just ready to do anything. Like, we can serve in different capacities, and you think you're fully eligible, rather. The fact of the matter is maybe you aren't as eligible as you imagine you are. And so I think the period of time that we've been here there in Pittsburgh where we live, I think it's been an intentional good time for us to be immersed in a work, but also a training time. And we've actually been quite blessed by just being there and being a part of a church that has contributed a lot to our own spirituality and our walk of faith and the examples of others, of course. And yeah,
that's pretty neat that it lets you. I mean, you can be on the cutting edge of the mission field, we'll get more to that later.
Mm-hmm.
And also you are in boot camp at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I think it's honestly well-established churches, and you mentioned we might get to this more later, and that's totally fine. But well-established churches in intentional areas can kind of offer two things to their members, and it's both something to put your energies into, like there often is some type of mission or some type of outward focus, which is always key. But there's also a stability and a structure, and structure I speak lightly, but some type of organized expression of your faith that is mutually benefiting, especially to us. I mean, we were moving to a new area, we had a new marriage, and yeah, we were moving away from our families, of course, and so we definitely needed the stability that we were gaining there. And yeah, there was different things that we did to manage all those new
So
fronts, but
you would have had the stability of a church that was a year old
mm-hmm.
with
yeah, whatever stability that is.
I mean, it would not from the outside, it would not look like it was a super stable place, but probably still considerably more stable than you and another family being in Africa or something.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say joining a church that was only a year old was more stabilizing in our experience, at least, than yeah, full-time missions would have been, because full-time missions often, in my view, lacks the elements of, like, there's people that are quite lonely in full-time ministry.
Yes, yeah.
It's like kind of a real thing, and well, full-time missionaries actually talk about that when they come back on furlough. So
Well, yeah, no doubt. I mean,
yeah,
which in that can also be a problem with, I mean, a lot of Mennonite city missions experience that same problem
mm-hmm.
of being lonely because, well, some of the loneliness is city culture being so different from country culture.
Right.
And even people that come to visit, they're like, well, what do you do? Like,
Right.
I mean, you live on a one-way street in a 3-story house. Like,
Yeah.
how?
What do you do with your life?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Living in the city is definitely different from living in the country, and you have to intentionally, if that's what you're doing, you have to just kind of change your whole way of thinking about things. Yeah, like literally, I think one of the main things, I've said it before to someone else, that one of the main adjustments I had to make moving to the city is, well, I previously referenced like selling my truck and like equipment. So like, have you ever taken a parking spot for granted? Well,
Oh, wow,
evidently
yeah.
I had, because like on-street parking with our rental house being like on this very steep street, it's like, okay, so we got groceries and the door won't stay open because it's such a steep street. Like little things like that. It was like you were realizing for the first time, it's like, oh, I'm just going to have to park in the street now. And so, yeah.
So when you moved there, you rented a house.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you, I mean, like, how do you go about finding a place to live? I mean, you're 3 hours away from where you lived.
Yeah.
So how did you find that place? Did you?
Yeah, I had been visiting the church there, and had, I think, a couple places to look at the one day when I was visiting, and looked at it with one of the other brothers in the church. And yeah, I mean, I had found the place on Remax, I think.
So you had like a second floor. I was never in there.
Yeah,
Second floor.
It was a duplex on the second and third floor of a residential home.
Okay, wait. You had the second and third floor.
Yeah.
But then the owners lived in the ground floor or something?
No, it was a commercial property for
Oh.
a larger company, and there was a tenant in the first floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow. You had to run them stairs a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, with our laundry in the basement and our backyard being a steep hill itself, and our front porch was nice and was fairly easy to access, but yeah, a lot of adjustments.
That is one thing that Pittsburgh has going for it, is a lot of hills.
Yeah. Keeps your legs in shape.
Yeah. It's always up or down somewhere.
Yeah.
So, other than, looking for a place to plug in, what attracted you to Pittsburgh? Like, I guess first, maybe, or you can talk about both of them if you want to, but like the area and the church, there's obviously some sort of combination there. Like you're not just, if that same church would have been in, Reading or Buffalo, you may not have chose it.
Sure.
Was there some sort of combination of factors there?
Yeah, so I would say one of the main draws for me was the simple fact that I think I had become restless with like my parents' generation, if I'm so bold to say. So when I reference my parents' generation, I would be referencing people that are, mid to late 40s or above, who most of their children are grown. They now finally live in the house of their dreams, perhaps, and that they're just well established. And when I viewed the families and the church that was starting there in Pittsburgh, I for the first time really saw some people who weren't quite my parents' generation. They're a little younger, but people who are potentially established, being willing to make sacrifice and do something like intentional. So interestingly enough, that kind of dissatisfaction actually produced in me a desire to be a part of something that was like breaking some new ground. And of course, I'm a young guy, and so all my aggressive passions seemed somewhat fulfilled by that perspective and that example that they were setting.
So how well has that worked out?
Now, what do you reference?
So has it felt? I mean, so does it still feel like you're? Does it still feel purposeful, or has it some of that wore off?
Yeah, generally it feels purposeful. I would say, as a church in general, I've learned that we're kind of in the honeymoon, in some sense. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what the future holds for us. I think the endeavor to move to a new place often takes so much energy that once you've done that, it almost feels like, wow, this is accomplishing. So let's just sit back and drink our coffee, right? So like even without speaking about others too much, I would just say for myself and my family, I have a desire to be less than lethargical,
Yeah.
Because I think you can become just a kind of a, I can't find the word that I'm looking for, but a kind of an indifferent, comfortable, normal person, and we don't want to be normal. We already know that. So you can do that in the country, and you can do that in the city. Honestly, you're really just changing your surroundings, and the potential culture and your neighbors might be a slight bit different. But there has to be something else that is your motivation. And honestly, I mean, both of us know that should be the love of Christ should constrain us, and we should have a love for others that pushes us into service. But yeah, moving to a city is not the silver bullet.
So, talking about silver bullets.
Yeah, well.
You brought it up. You live where you live now. How did you find that place, or why did you decide to buy that place? Like what's?
Yeah. So one thing that I've learned in life is that, well, you and I both were humans, and so humans are kind of like animals, right? Like I used to work on a farm, and every day, the animal needs to be cared for. Like every day the animal is eating food and doing most normal things like that. And one thing I've probably started to learn since I've now got my fully developed frontal cortex, 25 years old, and feeling pretty happy about that. I'm learning that there needs to be some sense of normalcy. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. I think before I was thinking about this seriously, like when I was engaged, I was thinking, we'll just go join a mission and just pour our heart and soul into some work somewhere. And God will get the glory, and we'll just be these on fire for God missionaries. And I was in a season of personal revival, and that was a great season. So, but starting a family, and I'm not trying to admit that I'm slowing down, but I definitely have been realizing that it's like, yeah, you have to pace yourself in life. And when I previously mentioned that we're kind of like animals, like every day you're going to probably eat something. You're probably going to need a bed. I mean, unless you want to sleep on the floor, you're probably going to need a kitchen sink. And so we were finding those things in a rental house and spending $1,000 a month. And that was a good season. I mean, we had a lot of new things, like I already mentioned, a new marriage, a new location, a new church. And so renting a move-in ready house was, a very comfortable, easy thing to do. But after we lived there for a while, the desire kind of began to grow again and me being a young guy, I've always had a desire to start a family and buy a house. Some people have different desires, but that was definitely something pertinent to me. And so I felt like, okay, well, finally I have a need for a house, so I should maybe buy one. And I think overall God has honored that desire, and it seems like it's been his will.
So how much did property prices factor into your willingness to move to Pittsburgh?
Property. Well, have you ever been to Pittsburgh? It's pretty obvious that you'll be able to find some place to live, because there's a lot of neglected spaces.
That was my point. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there are places, there are definitely towns where housing is pretty much, it's just not.
Evict the coons and you can move in.
Yeah. There are towns like that, but then there are lots of cities. Well, like here, like there's nothing. I'm going to say probably pretty easily. There's nothing under 150,000 in State College.
Okay.
Like pretty much nothing, and that's the bottom edge. Like you're looking at 250,000 for most houses.
Yeah. So to answer your question simply, and your question previously was just like, did property values affect my decision? I mean, honestly, no. I mean, I was moving to the church there in Pittsburgh with other things on my mind. I was not thinking about property value, and I honestly wasn't even harnessing too much of my faculty to worry too much about housing. I mean, I did worry about getting a place, but once we were able to rent something that seemed suitable, we weren't thinking about that too pertinently. So,
but then once you start looking for a place, you bought a fairly inexpensive one.
Yeah. So this taps into the whole thing of the example that I picked up from my dad. And there was a time in his life that he was in debt, quite a large amount of money, and made some pretty unwise decisions with real estate, ironically. And so God miraculously helped him out of that debt. And so one thing in my in my heritage, I guess, through him being my dad, is this sensitivity to too much debt. And so as soon as I got on the market having these desires to buy a place, I was like, I'm not going to buy a house for $200,000. I can't afford it, and B, even if I did have a perfect credit score and a down payment of $50,000 or $60,000, I wouldn't even want to own such a colossal piece of dirt. But
now that's depending where you are. You can buy a pretty nice house for $200,000. I mean, you can buy a decent house for $200,000 in Pittsburgh.
Relatively.
Not really nice, but decent.
Yeah.
Big. If
Definitely
nothing
big.
else.
Yeah. Might have some coons in the attic, but you can kick them out. Yeah.
But so where you bought your house is nice and close. It's in fairly close to the
relatively
the community, but it has some issues.
Oh yeah, what were its issues? Yeah.
So for one thing, you're in and this is where I'm thinking about when you're talking about mission. You being in a pretty, I don't know what you call it. It's not the ghettos quite, but it's a step up from the ghettos.
Yeah.
So you have a fairly inexpensive neighborhood, we'll put it that way.
Very affordable neighborhood. Well, and that's right where we feel at home, because I honestly feel more engaged with the neighborhood where we're currently living than I did where we were renting a house. So it's interesting. Before we bought this house, we were praying things like just asking God to help us be more immersive with our neighbors and just more connective. And we honestly did try on different accounts to like establish lasting relationships, and yeah, it seems like there was a more just a more too much relative, progressive thinking around us. People were not outside very much and just kind of living their good lives and doing their jobs, and like not many people on the street. And so there was limited connection point, honestly. And for someone like me from North Carolina, which is the South, the sunny South, where you wave at everyone when they're mowing their grass, and that's kind of who I was, even though I'd spent some time in Ohio not being an extreme northern state. I don't actually know the ways of the northern states, but you don't wave at everyone mowing their grass in the northern states. And I've learned that Pittsburgh, being a city and being somewhat northern, certainly compared to North Carolina, there's a lot of grumpy people. I mean, I moved to Pittsburgh, and I would walk down the street with just the best, having the best day of my life, just with my young wife and just enjoying the breeze. And I would try to say hi to people, and they'd just like not say a word. And I was like honestly offended. I mean, not that I could get offended because I didn't know these people from Adam, but I just remember thinking like the audacity, like what's wrong with you people? So like that cold attitude is just the way people are. And we might talk about it here in a little bit, but there is also crime activity, and so people withdraw. And
is that why people withdraw?
It's one of the contributing factors, yes. There's a saying called security through obscurity. So people that can feel like they're just trying to be obscure, they just bring their car in, park it, lock the car, walk across the porch into the house, deadbolt the door. That is them being as obscure as they feel is necessary, I guess.
So the idea is if nobody knows them, then, or nobody knows who they are?
If no one is able to pattern their lifestyle, yeah.
Okay.
Trying to limit their patterns is something that usually goes on in the back of people's minds. And it doesn't mean that people don't do gardens and plant flowers and all those other good things, but that's kind of the baseline. Like that is more normal in the city, where you just kind of do what you need to do, go into your house, and hopefully feel secure in your house. But that doesn't even always work out.
So what shape was this house in when you bought it? Was somebody living in it?
Our house was a fully lived-in home, yeah.
Okay.
When we bought it, so yeah, we believe it or not, one of the brothers was searching around on his phone for houses, and we were kind of looking for a house at that time, and he just blithely like showed me his phone and showed me the post for it, and I was like, oh, that could potentially be an option. It's 3/4 of a mile away, which is kind of far for our community, but and it's not the nicest house and not the nicest street, but we can maybe make it work, and seemed like a price that we could afford. So yeah, ever since he showed it to me, then it kind of perked my interest, and I don't know what to say. It just feels like it must have been God's will because it happened. So
3/4 of a mile was too far.
That was as described by our leadership, that was on the outer edge. That is as it continues to stand. So
okay, and it was lived in, but not very nice.
The property was probably being sold. It's my assumption that the property probably was failing the inspection from the Section 8 organization. That's the government funding. So they have, I think it's yearly inspections. And it was failing that probably badly enough that they didn't feel it was worth it to do all the necessary repairs. And so they just wanted to get out from under it. So, yeah. We wound up, my wife and I sat down and put together a budget of the projects we wanted to do and the dollar amounts that we thought it might take to do those projects. And well, yeah, we bought the house and we officially owned it. And I remember the feeling like once we bought it, it just sat for like a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh, I should probably go over and look at my house and see how it's looking. So I did. And so yeah, we began to get this plan together of like what things we might want to do, like a bathroom on the first floor and take out drop ceilings, and it was pretty rough. There was like a very heavy texture on the wall surface that we're going to try to remove, and there was also, there was smoking that was going on in the house, so it smelled of nicotine, and yeah, there's just different things like that we had to address.
Did you end up leaving any original plaster in there? Did you
No,
tear
the plaster is
you
not
tore
of
it all
God.
out? Okay, because I
Yeah.
thought,
Yeah, so we actually, so what I'm getting to is we did change our plan. We expanded our budget and we expanded the list of to-dos. And so that turned into a 30-yard dumpster with 15 tons of material coming out of that house.
Wow.
So, yeah.
so you had a little bit of activity there, Lynn, then here a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that was related to you, to the resentment to you fixing up the house?
That's a good question. Yeah, there's a special word for that, and I can't think of that word right now. But I don't think so. It's the assumption by the police force who was first telling us of this, and it's become my assumption as well that it was some type of involvement from the previous owner, or not the owner, but the tenant, I guess.
Okay.
So
somebody came by, it was at 9 o'clock at night?
yeah, around, or maybe a little after, but yeah.
And you're all sitting downstairs. You're downstairs.
We had just entered the dwelling, and we were sitting downstairs.
So you just got home.
We had just gotten home. Yeah.
Like to where the person could have seen you.
They actually drove past our house going up the one-way street.
Oh, the wrong way.
The wrong way, yeah. And so they actually saw us going up the steps, potentially. They sped past, but...
and then turned around and came back?
Yeah, so that the vehicle deposited a person with the gun, and they walked down the street while the car circled up around and came up an alley. We actually heard the car on the alley, and then it kind of stopped, and then the shooting happened, and then the person reconvened and left with that car.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So they shot up all your new windows in the front?
We didn't replace the windows, thankfully.
So those windows were not new?
Yeah, we were thinking about replacing all the windows, but no, I'm glad we hadn't.
Yeah,
So-
no doubt.
So that's perfect, yeah.
So I was thinking that you had replaced. So somebody
No.
else had replaced windows.
Yeah, those windows had been, replaced at some point. They're pretty much shot now.
Okay. So, but they didn't look like they were more than 20 years old.
They were probably installed when the house was, when it got that siding, I would
Okay.
assume. So,
then
20
they
to
would-
30 years old.
Yeah.
But
I
for
did-
cheap building materials, 20 years is long enough sometimes.
Yeah, no kidding. I knew from looking from just
Yeah.
being there that they weren't like the 1800s.
Yeah, they're
stuff
not
or-
the super, super old
Yeah.
ones. Yeah, you're right.
So did they put a hole in every window?
They essentially only damaged 2 of the larger windows, 1 small window above the door, and the 2 third-floor windows. The 2 small third-floor windows. So I think it was like 5 windows.
And how much damage inside the house?
Well, just bullet holes. So
Just bullet holes.
Yeah, just a
Did you
few
leave them there?
they're still there if anyone wants to come and look
You
at
didn't.
them.
You
No,
didn't
I didn't.
repair them.
No.
Do you lay awake at night looking at those bullet holes in your bedroom
don't.
ceiling?
Well, we don't lay awake, though we did for a while. But we actually moved our bedroom from the front of the house to the back of the house. So that has helped a lot. We'll probably remain back in the back bedroom. My wife somehow had the premonition that she would prefer to be in that back bedroom anyway. And despite the bullets, it actually is quieter in the back because there's less street noise with the front bedroom being we're way above the street, but if we have neighbors that, enjoy the later hours of the evening, and if we're laying in bed listening to them holler, it's kind of, a little bit that way.
So how did your neighbors take the shooting? Like, did they, how did they feel about it? Did they?
Oh, they were ready to help us out.
They come over and
they came out of their house with a gun soon after it
Oh, wow.
happened. Yeah. So they actually got into some pretty turbulent water that night because when the police pulled up, he
then
was
they had
standing
the
there
guns.
with his
my.
gun.
Yeah.
So yeah, they searched their whole house, and it was a
Oh, man.
whole thing around. Yeah. So all our neighbors are responding pretty much the same. Like, they're all saying things like, "Sorry that had to happen to you," and whatever. There's really not that much alarm from them. They're just more thinking. I think the house before we bought it was probably one of the worst households on the street, and so one thing we've been encouraged by is it seems like all our neighbors that are responding in their different, somewhat responsible ways is just proving the fact that it's there's not total debauchery all around us. It's hopeful that there's some structure and healthy livelihoods, in
So
place.
you aren't just, I mean, like the people, they are actually some normal people that are living normal lives.
Yeah, I would say, and that's what I was trying to say. I think the house before we owned it was probably one of the most questionable.
Okay.
Maybe not the most. There's other challenging households. Our neighbors directly across the street have their struggles, but I don't think it's criminal activity, which would often incite this type of, violence.
So were you able to recover any bullets?
Yeah. So, well, the police took all the ones that they could find.
Man.
And I was actually taking a shower when I was noticing that one of the bullet holes was like really, I don't know what the word would be, like a gentle streak across the ceiling. So it was obvious that the bullet was slowing down quite a bit. And it was deflecting off the ceiling. And then it was like in the drywall. It wasn't even through the drywall. It was like right there. So I pulled that one out. So I do have one. So,
Okay.
yeah. And the police weren't diligent enough to find that one. So, yeah.
So hopefully you will not get any more of those.
Yeah. But even if we do, I guess evidently God can keep us safe. I don't know.
Wow.
Our emotions were all over the map after that happened. And, I honestly found myself questioning God, like, God, you need to keep us safe. Like if we're in your will, you should be watching out for us. And I think one thing I've had to realize is like, well, one thing I think God was trying to tell me through this whole thing is I did protect you. And it's honestly hard for us to confide our emotions when they feel so, when you feel violated, obviously, and that's how we felt, it was easy to feel like God wasn't protecting us, but we had no flesh wounds. And so though we were very close to danger, he was and still is protecting us. And sometimes we just don't feel it that close to us. So
does that make you feel any, did you second guess moving to Pittsburgh at all?
second guess it? No, I wouldn't say I did. No.
So no hesitations. It's like,
Not with regard to moving to the city. I mean, some of the dear people that tried to help us through the situation were bringing up things like, like wondering if we were questioning whether or not it was wise to move there. And it just didn't seem like a good time to really have that conversation to me.
so
But
you didn't.
and I wasn't really I was feeling a lot of things, but I wasn't feeling like that was a very good time to like say, oh yeah, well, we can't live here anymore. Like, it's kind of a weird, it's a weird experience,
So that is one of the things that really like intrigues me about cities is there are several things about cities that people always usually bring up, and one of them is the violence.
Yeah.
Like people are like, if you move to the city, you might get shot.
Yeah.
I mean, especially, so I say move to the city. You can move to a nice part of the city and be pretty much not have to worry about that. But if you're living where lower class people live in the city, there is almost always a certain amount of crime.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like it just goes with it, with the
Oh yeah.
territory.
And especially the drug culture, anywhere there's that going on. Yeah.
So I find it really interesting that is an argument that people often use is like, is the violence. And I've definitely thought about it myself. Like at what point would I say, okay, I'm going to move to a city. What would your reaction have been, or how much different would your reaction have been if somebody had got shot? I've heard stories of some people that lived in town, and a group of youth were walking through town, and somebody shot at them. And they thought they were all missed, but when they got where they were going, some of the girls had, or at least one of the girls had holes in her dress.
Wow.
So it was close.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know how we would have responded.
I mean, you can't tell that, but
Yeah. If someone was fatally shot in the incident, or what?
Well, I'm just thinking.
Or just injured
I'm
in
just
some way.
saying, like, that's often an argument that I hear, or that you can't take your family there where it's not safe. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting topic to think about because, so in our society, safety is a big thing. Like, if we would adhere to all the safety protocol, you and I would probably have like big hard hats and huge gloves and like big old steel-toed boots, and probably should put on like I don't know, bullet-resistant vests at this point. Now that we're talking about this, and so I mean, safety is not the focus for the believer. Actually, when you think about it, so having a whole conversation about safety doesn't even apply for the Christian.
why not?
Because the goals of the kingdom aren't. It's not a broad enough topic. Safety in itself is not a broad enough topic, as it were. So if we're just going to sit here and talk about safety protocol and where might be the safest place to live, God would literally ordain that something come along and mess our little kid worlds up. I mean, we could have 8-inch thick slabs and they would shoot down from the top. So, yeah, that's something we really did wrestle with. Some of the families have brick houses, and so I don't know how much you know about bullets, but 40 caliber metal jacketed bullets, they come right through siding and wood and several interior walls before they stop. And so
What? 40 caliber?
Yeah.
Okay. Was it a rifle?
I don't know. I would assume, yeah.
Because like a I don't know, like a 9mm pistol, which I don't know what that caliber would translate to, which is very common, like very common. I would be surprised if they would go through a good all the way through a good wall with much.
Well, metal jacket. So
Yeah, metal jacket will make a big difference. Yeah.
yeah, it was metal jacket.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, some of the other families have brick houses, and obviously, if you have a brick house, you can feel happy that. But everyone's got windows.
Yeah.
and they actually focused on the windows. They started at the top and just like came all the way down. So, but yeah, it's kind of, it forced us to think about, what is our directive for life? Like, is it about safety, and should we move because this is no longer safe, as it were? And yeah, it didn't feel like that was necessarily the thing for us to do. So, so we're still living there, praying for God's safety and trying to be diligent with our own life of faith. And of course we lock our doors, but we did that in the past. And there was actually a news article that was done on the whole situation, and they wrongly said that we mentioned that we might do security cameras, which is falsified. And it's not falsified, it's completely false. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that you were looking into security cameras for the future, and I was like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah, I actually had siblings that were recommending that, and my parents actually recommended
Security cameras.
The use of a security camera, yeah. So I don't buy it, just because I think I think it would just not really help our peace any. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, even the most intricate ones that are sending little notifications when a squirrel walks past, it's like, how does that help me in the middle of the night when I see a coon digging in my trash to be like notified? And it's like, you're always tense, and it's like, that's just not how I choose to deal with the situation. So.
So how has that, like you said, your neighbors have been sympathetic. Do you feel like it has kind of brought them any closer to you through that? Like, have they kind of like given you a little more traction in the neighborhood?
Oh yeah, it's definitely given us traction. I would say it's just going to be up to us what we do with that traction. But yeah, I know pretty much all our neighbors now.
Okay.
And they've been introducing themselves to me. So, and we're very observed because of it, I would say. And I would say I have, I know most of them, and I would have functional relationships with like half of them, probably. where we're able to say hello to each other and carry on a decent conversation. Probably nothing substantial, but hopefully that will come.
Yeah, I mean, it takes 3 or 4 years just to get to know people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're already just on a high basis with people
Yeah.
in town is a big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Like you said, especially where you lived earlier, like being able to just say hi, like people,
Right.
like in town, it's incredible how people just
Yeah.
do not want to. They do not want to have anything to do with somebody they don't know.
Right. Yeah. They just totally avoid you. Yep.
And we live, right here, literally right here. There's 38 households just, within 100 yards of us,
Wow.
and we know 4 or 5 of them.
Wow.
Like, and we can we recognize them, and most of them will wave now.
Okay.
But we lived here 7 years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it takes time, and I think it also takes intentionality. I mean, I naturally enjoy giving gifts, so that's always a good thing to do, to try to prove your trust to
Now, how do you
someone.
give a gift?
Yeah,
mean,
and
like
what do you
is-
give? That's a good point.
You
I
go
mean,
buy-
I've been giving food articles, and
Okay.
they've been well received. At
go
least
buy a
from
bag
the-
of lollipops or what?
I mean, I literally made popcorn and put it in a bowl and handed it to my neighbor.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Or a loaf of bread. Not that I know how to bake bread, but
Yeah.
anytime my wife makes something, and I always try to see if there's extra and do what I can. And then there's another neighbor who's pretty much an investor. He's bought an old house, and so he borrows tools from. Well, does he? Yeah, I've helped him out with some of my tools, and I've been recently borrowing something from him.
Well, I've
So-
heard that you're not accepted into the neighborhood until you borrow tools from your neighbors.
Yeah. Well, he was
Like-
offering, so I was
okay.
like, yeah, sure, thanks.
If they're always borrowing your tools, then
Yeah.
it doesn't count. But when you borrow tools from your neighbors,
Okay.
then
And
you're
it's a
in.
relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting because, like where we live here, we have a little bit more property
Okay.
than most of the neighbors. I mean, especially the ones that live
Right.
in the apartments here. So they'll come over often and ask for a jack or
Yeah.
whatever. Like there's several of them that'll come over for
Okay.
different things like that, which is great. Like I'm happy to loan it to them. It's just that when you live in an apartment, you can't, like you said, you can't have very much stuff. So
Yeah. That's not
You
really that
can't,
much to offer.
it's not like they have stuff to loan.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And also think about gifts. Like it's incredible. Like people will, if they don't want to get to know you, they'll just refuse everything.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And also with if you're renting, like versus owning,
Okay.
like in the apartment buildings, people, the
Yeah.
turnover is huge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So they come and go. Like very few of them are here more than a year or two,
Okay. Huh.
and that really makes it hard to get to know.
Yeah.
people.
I mean, there's a whole different way of thinking if you're renting, honestly. I mean, not that it has to be that way, but the tendency would be if you're renting that you just care less a little bit
Well,
because
you-
it's temporary and yeah.
You go inside and you watch your TV or whatever, then you go to work
Right.
the next day, and
Yeah.
it's just the way it is.
Try to pay your rent.
Yeah. So, do people rent like the neighborhood you're in now? Are they less renters, more renters, same?
It's still a combination. I would say there's probably a 50-50 mix of renting and individual home ownership. So the first question we had so I was praying about buying this house, and so a couple times a week I would walk down to this house and pray about it and pray over the house and everything. And the one evening when we were walking, I met the neighbor, an older couple who, but I mean, they're a little cynical of probably everything. So anyway, I tried to say hi and be real nice and everything, and she was like, and I told her, I guess at that point we were planning to buy it, and I was like, yeah, we're buying this house over here, just to let you know, like whatever, nice to meet you, and she was like, are you gonna live there or are you gonna like just buy it and sell it? That's the only thing she wanted to know, and I was like, no, I'm gonna live here, with my young wife, and I have one son. And she's like, okay, she seems satisfied with that answer. And so obviously to her, her and her husband own that house. So she's obviously attentive to the fact that
Gotcha.
too many rentals destroys the neighborhood.
Yeah.
In some way. At least it does where I live.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
There's irresponsibility. So
Somehow, like flipping houses and turning them into rentals is is a pretty common.
yeah.
Lots of investors. I've heard somewhere that like some of the very largest investment companies in the U.S. own a significant portion of rentals.
Really? Huh.
Big. I want to say a third, but I'm not sure of the housing.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a lot of housing
It's a lot of housing. Yeah. Yeah. Somehow the whole system has definitely got its challenges because I think that is just what happens. There's government organizations that help people rent, and then there's big companies that own these properties to be rented, and yeah, there's just a lot of dysfunction in those relationships, and the people are struggling at different times through their own lives and are not being responsible, and they don't own the house, and so they don't feel any obligation, and now they're not even paying for the house hardly.
Yeah.
And so then they feel even less responsibility, so then they just destroy the house, and it's just a kind of a negative outcome, honestly. But
Yeah, it does get
definitely going to need a new heaven and a new earth one of these days. So
Yeah, that Section 8 housing was actually what this is here too.
okay,
So,
really, those apartments?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Nice new apartments that, well, I say new, they're 10 years old, but
Sure.
yeah, I think that's how they got put in as a Section 8, so
I see. Yeah.
we're eligible for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, which is great. Like this town is so gentrified that
Okay.
if I wasn't living next to Section 8 housing, I don't know if I'd survive.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here.
It's kind of my kind of people. So what else? What else is going on in Pittsburgh that is newsworthy?
Newsworthy. Yeah. You're doing well with your questions. I'm trying to think what's newsworthy around there. Yeah, I guess talking about the incident there with the conflict that we had, it's just made me more aware of criminal activity, and I've had to kind of start thinking that through a little bit more. And there was recently a movie production being filmed close to our house where they were replicating gunfire, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And so ever since this incident, where it's like a vivid mark in your memory of what gunfire sounds like and what shattering windows sounds like and what it sounds like to have 15 bullets hit your house in a few seconds, it's like I don't have any desire to watch,
You don't want to watch that movie.
I don't want to watch these traumatic movies, honestly. Like, this is, I don't know, it's kind of a side point, but it's like why are we need to participate in the renewal. Like the gunfire and the violence, just thinking about that overly much in these movies that are honestly evil. It just gave me a whole different distaste for the evil things that are perpetrated in our society. And I guess until recently, I was somewhat neutral almost on violence. Not that I was choosing to watch violent movies, but it's like people are lame if they think they need to watch that. But I don't even understand to this day what the hunger is. But it's like, yeah, you're not going to experience the renewal just participating in the very thing that is in conflict with Christ and His kingdom and the purposes of Christ in the world. And yeah.
Especially when you start that you're getting a deeper heart feeling for the sound of gunfire, when you're at the wrong end of the muzzle.
Yeah, exactly. It just changes your perspective.
Yeah, yeah, it does. So, what do you do for a living now?
So the first year when we moved to Pittsburgh, I just did part-time work actually. So I had the idea that I wanted to kind of like the Old Testament Israelites, where a young married would not go out to war or whatever. So I took that principle and applied it to my 21st century life, and got a part-time job working about 30 hours a week, and 30 or 35 or so, and doing a pretty easy job, and just trying to establish. And then I wanted to get into construction, so that's what I did eventually. And so at the beginning of 2024, I launched a company just doing pretty much handyman work, lightweight construction and some remodel and some fence install and some other types of installs. So yeah.
So how does that work for you in with you have a 3-story house starting a story off the ground?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and what you have a car that you have your
Yeah, so I have been very grateful for the house where we live now, because it's a one-way street, and so it's kind of an abandoned sidewalk, I guess. And so for the purposes of the company, I have a little bit of space there where I can stack trash, and I mean, not that the trash is blowing in the wind, but like, maybe old pieces of wood and debris like that. And then my basement is where I pretty much dispatch from, up and down a flight of stairs. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So you use your basement as a storage room for your tools?
Yeah, pretty much. And my day-to-day toolkit is in the trunk of my hatchback. And then I have a trailer too, which is pretty much my affordable truck bed that I pull with the car. So, yeah.
So
works pretty good.
Do you have plenty of work in
Oh yeah, that is definitely the huge benefit of living in the city is the work opportunity, I would say. So when I lived in the country, oddly enough, I feel like that was a time that God was probably using to prepare me for this season of life, because every day, or almost every day, all through the week, I was driving into Columbus, Ohio, which was about an hour and 20 minutes each way. So, so yeah, that definitely conditioned me for an appreciation for like a small city lot, because that's where I was always working, doing residential fencing. And it also gives me the appreciation now that I live in the city, that in 30 minutes direction, in any direction, I can have, be in a totally different neighborhood in a very short amount of time. And so I don't take that for granted, just because for 3.5 years or so I did quite a hefty commute. So
wow, so there is definitely a big advantage to living in the city if you can deal with the negatives.
Yeah, if you can deal with the negatives, there's definitely huge positives. And like I said earlier, and we were discussing it a little bit, like, you do have to change your lifestyle radically. I mean, you're not gonna be able to have like a big bonfire in the backyard with a 20-foot flame any longer, and like all those things don't really work too well in the city. But or a vegetable garden, you may or may not be able to have.
Have you been able to? Do you have a garden at all, or?
Well, we would hope to at some point, but one of the main problems is like too much shade, honestly.
Oh yeah.
So you either got to cut down all your neighbors' trees, or your own house is going to cause shade at different points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're probably not at the stage of life where you're even ready to do any community gardening or anything like that.
There are some of the families do have a community garden of sorts. They've grown some charity watermelons and different things. Charity, I mean, as in someone else decided when they were ready and helped themselves. I mean, I don't have a huge vision for community gardening. I would probably rather put in a park or something like that. I enjoy gardening, but yeah, I've just seen too many community gardens where it's like, the community used to be really excited, and now the community is gone, and it's a weed patch.
That is exactly right.
With a nice fence. And there's actually several just like that around the area, and I'm like, if I'm going to be the next guy with my big idea to start a community garden, it's probably going to end up looking just like that. And so
that's pretty much the story with community gardens. Well, it's the story with a lot of gardens.
Yeah.
Is that it's so much fun to get them started in the spring,
right.
But then
by the fall, it's like you hardly have the time to go.
Nobody has the bandwidth anymore, and school started, and it's just
right.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, gardening is a tough thing. But
So how are you going to be Amish in the city with no garden?
who said I was Amish? Yeah, well, you'd be surprised. A lot of Amish communities wouldn't die even if they wouldn't have their gardens, but they probably wouldn't prefer it either. I actually don't. I wasn't raised with that many people relying on a vegetable garden for much of their food. Some more than others, but the main lesson to be learned from a rich heritage, if you're going to reference the Amish here, is actually something I've observed is not just growing the food, which that's often focused on. It's more food preservation and like preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
So like understanding how to, can is kind of the customary trait of the Amish if we're going to mention them. And so preservation, that's what I'm saying. Like
Right.
whether it's growing it or buying it in bulk, there's certainly something to be said for those who figure out that if you're going to go weekly and spend $150 at the grocery store, you could cut that cost way down by having a stock freezer with the different necessities like corn, for instance, save flour and freeze it or whatever. I mean, that to me is the bigger principle, not just necessarily growing it.
Right.
So.
Well, and it's just in a city, it's very difficult to do. I mean,
Oh yeah.
unless you really have a passion for it.
Yeah, I mean, you could buy a empty lot, and it'd be quite costly to do that, and there again, you'd have to fight the whole thing of shade because it could be in between your two neighbors' houses, and it won't potentially get that much sun.
So, what do you intend for your? How many children do you have?
2 children now.
You have 2 children.
Yep.
So you, both boys?
A boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl.
Yep.
Okay. So, what do you intend for your children to do as they grow up in Pittsburgh? I mean, are you gonna keep this frontier rolling, or are you gonna stay in Pittsburgh for a while?
Yeah, definitely. I would say keep the frontier rolling as much as possible. Yeah. We're supposed to be pilgrims, of course, in this life, and so
New neighborhood, watch out! Here we come.
yeah, I would say just keep up the effort, and that's whether it's moving to a new area or further developing through life as you go along. So I would hope that if we're still living in Pittsburgh when my son is, 6, 7, 8, I would think that I would probably need to think that through a little more seriously then. But I would also probably say that there would be a way to engage children at those ages where they need more things to do, but probably can't quite come to the workplace with their father. Yeah, there's just different ages and different expectations for every parent. But I mean, like I said previously, I was screwing down metal at surprising heights at I was 8 years old.
Well, yeah,
So, I don't really see any huge conflict. We already had our safety conversation. We're obviously not hyper-focused on that. And obviously I don't want to be irresponsible, but
yeah.
I was gleaning tons of construction experience below the age of 15, honestly. So
I was 6 or 7 stories up on scaffolding, and I used to like to shake the scaffolding when I was a little kid. Well, my dad did not like that.
Yeah, you enjoyed it more than him.
I didn't. I wasn't smart enough to realize the danger, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that said, I'm just suggesting that with my line of work, there's a potential that my son could help me with my breadwinning activities, and if it's not that, one thing that you have to realize, if you're living in the city, you have to you're more immersive in the society just by deference, just by living there. You do have your house and you do have your backyard and potentially a spot to park, but if you're going to go for a bike ride, you're not biking around the back 40, as it were. You're biking down the street to the bike path, and from there going a whole slew of different areas, or you could get and then if you're going to go to a park, or if you want to go play volleyball, you're probably going to be at the school park, not in your beautiful backyard as people in the country have that they just finished mowing.
So all of it forces this interaction.
Yeah, and I think all those things are good things, actually, because it forces you out of your off your property, as it were, and into society. I mean, and there are parks around us that are busy in the summertime.
So how do you feel about, like, is there a danger of, I mean, does that create a bigger danger than of losing separation when the children that you play with are going to be the neighbor children, and when you're at the park, you're going to be more likely to be there with other people.
Mm-hmm. And what's the concern that you're?
So you're definitely blurring the edges of your culture. Where if it was just some church families getting together on the back 40,
sure,
you wouldn't have any other influence.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, I would actually argue that you're going to have influence always, even if it's just other church families. Now, hopefully that influence is a godly influence. And the difference that I think you're trying to float is there's going to be a tendency for worldliness and different vices, perhaps.
Well, you will blur the edges. I mean, there's just no doubt. It's impossible to get away from the blurring of the edge. Like,
yeah.
But I guess the question is more, and that's another big concern that I often hear people, like, when they move to a city, they're like, yeah, but it's just for children especially, it's a big question. Like,
okay,
when you have teenagers, cities can become very. I mean, they're a lot. They can be a lot of fun. They're a very interesting place.
Right.
And there's very few. I mean, even our good neighbors, even the good neighbors that we have,
mm-hmm.
are still quite different than what we're. Quite different than the way we want our children to behave.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to put some thoughts together in my own mind. I mean, there's kind of, I guess, multiple ways of looking at the world. Like, you can view the world as a danger that you need to be protected from, or you can view the world as something that you need to be protected from, but also be able to live with at some level. And that's where I kind of bring in the scripture verse that says, that we're supposed to be in the world but not of the world. I would apply that here, where I'm thinking, so Jesus has saved us from the passions of our flesh and a life of sin and selfishness. So in some sense, the world was in us at some point before we were redeemed. And if we would fail to be continually redeemed by him, we would fall back into those same sins of the flesh. And so the sins that affect and infect our society are the same sins that you and I have dealt with. And so I'm pretty careful in general to have this attitude of, like, us and them, like, we're the righteous and you all were at the park, so please give me some distance, that kind of thing. Like, I don't really generally have to think about my faith as I'm, like, living it in a vacuum where it's not suitable for the world and the real experiences that I might have in the world. If you want to have a faith like that, yeah, you probably should live in a community where there's a lot of other safe people, because you might not make it, in the real world. So yeah, it depends on how immersive you want to be, honestly.
So we all read them verses that said, in the world, but not of the world, and thought they said, not in the world or of the world. And just decided to stay out of the world. And,
yeah.
I mean,
I would say that's a misconception. Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, that's coming, That's the new creation where we can just walk around freely and realize that everyone here is worshiping the Lamb. And that's going to be one of the incredible pleasures of the new creation. And we'll get to enjoy that then. Now, until then, we are going to have to be careful with who we choose to hang out with. I mean, who we allow our children to be close friends with, who we allow our children's, like, their friend group, at this stage in our family's life, it's not like a huge problem. We're not allowing them to go to anyone's house. But yeah, if your children are young people and you live in a city and you're letting them for long afternoons go to some family's house that you're not too sure about, I would say that's pretty negligent. But it doesn't make much difference if they're going to their friend's house that, even if you live in the country, and there's a questionable thing or two happening, the same outcome is there. So yeah.
Well, you see very little. I mean, most Anabaptists that live in the country do not have many worldly friends, but most Anabaptists that live in the city have a lot of worldly friends. It seems like.
What do you mean by worldly?
I should say worldly. That's kind of a term that only Anabaptists would understand.
Okay.
Non-Mennonite or non-Anabaptist friends.
Okay.
Okay, well, that'd probably be
Yeah.
And there's all like I don't. So, some of us see that as actually a benefit. Like we're not going to, not going to reach those around you if you don't make some effort to engage with them.
Sure.
Other than just standing there with a sign that says "Repent or Perish." Like, there's got to be more engagement than that. I mean, that's not maybe not a bad idea either, but there has to be more than that.
Yeah, at least it's more than lethargy, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you done any of that?
What's that? Holding signs?
Yeah.
I've assisted some works, but I've not initiated much on my own.
In Pittsburgh?
Not in Pittsburgh, in my previous experience.
And what did you think about that? How'd that...
Yeah, I mean, anything more than lethargy is great. I mean,
Okay.
we live in a society that's, for most intents and purposes, quite lazy. So it's pretty easy to be lazy with our faith and our proclamation of the truth. So there's definitely different ways to proclaim the truth. And I mean, this podcast is, in some sense, a way of proclaiming something. I hope it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth of the gospel as God's redeemed us, and we can have this conversation. But yeah, I mean, the church that we're part of there in Pittsburgh, they don't necessarily view the street ministry as very beneficial, actually. So I've not pursued too much of that. I would say that if one of them was motivated to do that type of ministry, I would probably support it. But I don't feel like I have the backing or need right now to initiate tons of it on my own. Generally just because, yeah, it's not very wise to go out by yourself. I've done a fair bit of that, but I've also had different instances where I felt pretty vulnerable trying to do street ministry and engage people by myself. You feel the most nervous when you're by yourself and you're approaching a group of people and trying to do intentional ministry, and it's like, well, what if all of a sudden they get mad at you, and it's like, you're gonna have to put on your running shoes, which I've usually got mine on, but anyway.
Yeah. So would you have done that in Columbus, or where would you have?
Yeah, I did some in Columbus. Yeah, my old pastor from Ohio was pretty experienced with campus ministry, okay. And there's quite a bit of opportunity in Pittsburgh for that type of ministry if someone would want to develop it more. There's actually a group that we have some contact with there's a church plant in the neighborhood where there's like 5 universities, so there's a lot of students around if you wanted to talk to them.
So what what kind of campus ministry did he run? Was it like something where you went in certain days of the week, or was it something established on campus?
Yeah, it wasn't super formative. He would more, and not that I even helped with this as much. I didn't do the campus ministry as much as he did, and I only observed this from his example. But he would, I think, go in and preach sometimes, and then do intentional dialogue pretty much with the university students, and probably try to prepare questions ahead of time, and they would ask the stereotypical questions. The university crowd is usually going to be asking certain questions to Christians, and they usually hate Christians, so it's always a good time. If you can have some defense of the gospel, it's always you're trying to sow seed. That's kind of the focus.
Yeah. I did we used to go when I was in my upper teens, lower 20s. I used to go with my dad and a group of guys. We'd go to downtown Springfield and hold up signs. But we always went it was actually a Christian campus.
Okay.
Near there, but there was lots of bars and coffee shops.
I see.
And we'd go into the bar and coffee shop district late at night.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was a rush. You felt like you were doing something.
Right.
And people would come by, and most people were aggressive and kind of mean.
Mm-hmm.
But some people were actually interested and you'd have a 15-20 minute conversation with people regularly. I mean, almost every time.
Yeah.
With somebody.
Yeah.
People tried to drop glass on my dad and threw donuts at us.
Okay.
Stuff like that too, but
That's great. Yeah.
It wasn't like it was. It didn't feel overly dangerous to me. There were a lot of people that said it was, and it might have been, but
yeah, regardless.
Definitely, as the night got later, like as it got toward 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, people would be drunker,
right?
More drunk people, and then they would be. Seemed like it was less productive, maybe at some point.
Yeah. The fun thing about talking to drunk people is you can just get animated with them.
Oh,
it's a good way to like kind of release pent up emotions and everything.
You can really practice on it.
Yeah, just kind of just have a good little. Not that you don't need to love them like another human being, but there's definitely something strongly affecting their mood, and so
they might not remember it tomorrow morning.
You can just get really animated with them, and it's always a good riot.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I don't know that. I'm also kind of in between on whether it's how useful it is, but it's definitely probably useful for us.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it was useful in my life to some degree. If there was any place where it wasn't useful, so it might have just made me feel better than I was.
Okay, yeah. A false sense of
because
accomplishment.
You get out there with a bunch of sinners and just start laying down the fire on them.
Yeah, giving them the moral law and everything. Yeah.
It gets, you can start feeling like you're pretty good. But.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot, definitely way easier than just living your life in front of your neighbors.
Yeah, interesting you say that.
Because at least for me, I mean, I'm go find some strangers and well, right now it's telemarketers.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've been having some fun with them, but
yeah, they called.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I didn't direct all those energies. One time a telemarketer called me up, and it wasn't a telemarketer actually. It was like a modern day scam, and I located his home address through the ownership of a property that he was trying to scam me on. And I looked up his property and was telling him about his property, and he was not happy. Oh my! I guess I maybe took that one a little too far. But,
yeah. But no, I mean, I enjoy just having conversations with people about the gospel, but it's really hard to get anybody to do that because part of the reason is I wouldn't be telling them unless I felt like I had something to share.
mm-hmm.
So if I have something to share, then they're going to feel like they have something to learn. And nobody really wants to feel that.
Right.
So it's hard to really know how to present that in a way that people are. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to get people interested without.
Well, one thing I've observed from the example of someone on YouTube is like face the arguments for or against the truth of God's word together with kind of the skeptic's attitude at first, and in doing so you'll probably be standing with them because of course they're generally skeptical, and but as you kind of have that approach, I don't think it's forced meekness, but it is somewhat meek, and then you kind of reach a conclusion, not always with them because they'll usually in their unbelief and hardness of heart kind of lose you, but you kind of arrive at a conclusion perhaps that they were able to at least see the different contributing factors. But yeah, it's not going to be super fruitful if you're just trying to cram your belief onto someone else. Yeah, I have not seen incredible fruit from that, but it's also not about the fruit, so why did I even mention that? I'm not sure.
So if you're sitting in Pittsburgh, you've been there for a couple of years now, church has been there for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, whatever that was. 3.5. And you're not really doing street ministry other than on your street.
And other streets, but
like, how do you feel? What do you mean by? So you're walking a bigger loop? Is that what you're saying?
well, other people in the community are doing their own
right.
personal ministry, perhaps, but.
So other than each family's kind of personal ministry there, are you doing anything organized like together?
The only organized thing other than that is the once a month pizza night that we try to do.
What's that?
Where we go to a park and one of the people will bring pizza and we're supposed to invite our friends, and it doesn't always produce super many people to come with us, but we've also just tried to like be immersive with the people that are at the park, and I think it's been generally a good experience. I don't know.
So, but you haven't really seen just big revival.
No, we're not really doing what it takes to have big revival, so I doubt we'll see big revival. But I think that's fine for the stage we're at. The other thing we've done is like a book study where we've invited people to come to the book study, and the latest book study we studied was the Screwtape Letters, and we had someone that was interested in doing it, one of a local community person, but she then eventually said that it just seemed like it was, I don't know what her word was, but too foreboding, or she just couldn't handle the heavy nature
too dark
of the Screwtape Letters, if anyone's aware of that. So, and me on the other hand, I quite enjoyed it. So, anyway, but yeah, I don't know where to put all that. There's been different people that have been interested in coming to the book studies, and we've had other ones as well. So, I guess we'll keep that up.
Yeah, that's amazing.
What perspectives do you have for us as you observe our lives there in Pittsburgh?
Well, I know that it takes a long time to do. I mean, so there's part of me that really resonates with your impatience and your.
Well, who said I was impatient?
Well, you said so. You admitted it a couple times.
Okay.
You said you didn't want to be stagnant, so you're.
Oh yeah, pursue that frontier line. Yeah.
So front line, like that's like I'm just. It's very hard for me to be content sitting still.
Okay, gotcha.
And it drives me crazy to look around and see other people sitting still.
Yeah.
But as I get older and start realizing how things, like how much automation you have to have in your life to live a sane life. Like,
right.
Like if certain things didn't happen certain times of the day,
yeah.
If you had to redo that every day, you could do that for a while.
Yeah.
But eventually you can't find a parking spot, and it takes you an hour and a half to find a parking spot, then your life is just kind of messed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is definitely some validity in having a structure of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow I feel like we're not going to see New Testament growth in a church without some New Testament zeal.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know what that looks like. I don't even know what it should look like.
Well, it probably looked like the examples that were left us from the apostles, perhaps.
I mean, to some degree, but I can't figure out if the story is told in such rapid fashion that we think it all happened really quickly. Where, if you look at Paul's ministry, it covered a big period of time.
Yeah, sure.
I think 14 or 15 years.
Right.
So if we looked back, I think more in terms of this. If I may live till I was 90 and died,
Mm-hmm.
would I be happy with what I did?
If you would then condense that into a
If
story form or something.
If I look back to when I'm 40 or 20 or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like, it's kind of, as you look back, you're like, oh, wow. Like, I did nothing for the last 10 years, but wow, a lot of stuff has gone under the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to be aggressive in not living in a way that we're going to regret,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time not be too impatient to where we just have lives where we crash and burn.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's previously what I was trying to say with like my comments about us being kind of like animals where we have daily needs and things. This kind of goes back to something that, again, I've realized with getting married and starting a family, that's like there has to be some type of pattern for your life. There has to be some sort of normalcy. You have to have, or it's good to have rather, some type of home base. A local faith expression is beneficial. I mean, to have a church that you regularly attend is completely needful. And so if you're just going to try to go through life without all those, potentially necessary things, and I think they are, you're going to struggle. I mean, you're not going to be very functional. It's like saying, God, I'm ready to be used by you, and you've got high debts. For instance, it's like,
no kidding.
Well, how useful are you? You know what I'm saying? So, and obviously, every aspect of life needs to be held in some type of balance, but we have to be willing to be patient and yet be willing to be strategic with the energies that we do have, and we need to quit wasting our time. Because I think often with life we kind of get to a certain place and then we're happy with where we're at, and so then we just want to coast forward on an even level where in a lot of ways God's probably calling us on into life that's more fulfilling than we'll ever know, and it's just sometimes we're too lazy to realize that we're missing it. And when you talked about being 90 someday and hoping to not look back and regret, I don't want to be 90 either, for a couple different reasons, because I hope I'm worn out by then. But if I am 90, I would hope that I will have lived a meaningful life, that I can see that God at different points has clearly led, and I've been willing to obey at every step of the way. And so, that's something I want to continue to think about and pray about is faithfulness and impatience and faithfulness. The opposite of impatience, I think, is just faithfulness, where it doesn't always, regular old life is just going to be an experience that we all have to deal with. We're all going to get a job that we probably don't perfectly prefer, or we might all be forced to love people that we don't always perfectly love or just have an extreme affiliation for, but that's the grind of life that we need to kind of deal with pretty early in life if we're going to make it anywhere. So
that's where we get stuck.
But certainly I would say settling into some experience and then just being perfectly happy with kind of where you're at on a social economical level, or whatever the word is there. If you're just comfortable and then you just sit at that level for like the next 20 years. I would say that's a problem. I don't know what I'm going to do in my life to stop that trend, but that is the normal thing, you know, to get comfortable. 401k, nice home, nice retirement, get a good car too. Good car and get good tires. Yeah. That's our society. So we need to resist those things. And this ties into security too. We all want to be secure. And I was working in a really nice neighborhood the other day, and I caught myself thinking a couple times, like, yeah, well, I'll bet if I lived in this neighborhood, I probably wouldn't have had that happen to my house. And yeah, I mean, that's the normal way to think. But what is normal? We want to be more normal than most of the other people around us, because as Christians, I think we can be as the most human as ever. Like we're more like God created us to be by following Christ than other people will ever know not following Christ. So
I think part of the way to keep from getting too lethargic and too stagnant is to not get too comfortable, because once you start having too much comfort in your life, it just gets way easier to be stagnant.
Yeah. So how are we going to do that? You're a lot older than me, so you should have all kinds of perspectives.
As I get older, I realize that when I was your age, I was like, I'm never going to be stagnant. I'm going to be on fire the whole time. Well, I'm like, wow, I have those same tendencies, and they're bad enough now. You know, I'm mid 40s.
Yeah.
Like I have those stagnant tendencies much worse than I did in my 20s.
Okay. Wow.
To where, like, if it compounds again till I'm in my 60s,
you might be really ugly.
I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah, when you get a plan together, just let me know, and we can collaborate.
That sounds like fun. Okay, well, I was kind of wondering about, like, more of church level stuff. So we've kind of talked more about you and yours, which is fine.
Yeah, that's great.
But what about is the church there at Pittsburgh, is it different doctrinally? Is it different in practice than what you grew up with?
Well, let's think. It's a little bit different from what I grew up with. There's a few different emphases, I would say, that are different. And yeah.
So I feel like I mean, I don't know the church you came from. I don't even know. So you said you were an hour and 30 minutes from Columbus.
All right.
So which direction from Columbus?
Northeast, or
northeast of Columbus.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were getting up towards Indiana.
No.
Area.
Well, Columbus would be east of Indiana, so essentially we were headed east. So.
Oh, you were northeast of Columbus,
Yeah.
not northwest. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Holmes County.
Yeah, we were about 45 minutes south of Holmes County.
Oh.
In the adjacent
Oh,
county.
wow.
Yeah.
So you were looking for new territory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bottleneck.
Yeah, it is a bottleneck. Oh, that's neat. One thing I lived in Missouri, and I thought, wow, anybody living in Pennsylvania has to be just something wrong with them, because how could you live in Pennsylvania when most of the U.S. is uninhabited by Anabaptists?
Right.
But as I got a little bit closer to the hive, I realized that the perspective is a little different. Like, it is amazing how many niches there are inside of Lancaster County, inside of Holmes County.
Yeah, I know.
Like, there are a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people doing pretty interesting stuff. But anyway, and you were going to a charity type church.
Essentially, yeah.
Ish.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still going to a charity type church?
From my perspective, sure.
Okay.
That's a rabbit hole question. Yeah, I would say that honestly, we're probably doing church similar to my church background than it would be to some of the other traditions that are represented from the other families. So, yeah, I don't think that too much has changed in that regard.
So you're having your services in a house.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Or a house church that's not a house church.
Yeah. Be very clear about this.
Yeah.
This is not a house church.
Yeah. Because we all know that allegedly, house churches don't work, so definitely don't want to.
Well, there's a big difference, though. There is actually a big cultural difference between a church in a house and a house church.
Sure.
Because you're not a bunch of disgruntled families getting together that just didn't want a church than anybody else.
Sure, yeah. That's hopefully the biggest difference, yeah.
You are intentionally meeting in a house for now or forever?
For now. We've discussed as a group that the need for a bigger facility might come, and I think we'd be open to that idea just because before we do a healthy church split, and when I say healthy, I mean because of size, hopefully, that we'd probably outgrow the current house that we're meeting in. It already feels quite packed. Some people like the cozy feeling. Other people don't prefer the cozy feeling. When cozy, I just mean, yeah, it can be tight if there's visiting people, for instance.
Yeah. So how your service is set up?
Well, they're set up by our elder. It kind of organizes the way in which we all are able to take a turn, all of us brothers.
So at your own house?
Oh.
Or do you just always go to
generally
one person's
at one person's house,
Okay.
yeah. And generally at that one person's house. I thought you were talking about the service itself. Yeah,
That too.
well, the service itself is organized in a varied fashion, but we all essentially take turns doing different things like leading out in a communion service or moderating and leading in the time of worship and corporate singing and a lesson for the children and then a main message. So those are all titles that we share around.
So currently there's 5 brothers?
Yeah.
So those responsibilities are delegated out to all of you, rotate between them or something?
Yep.
So that pretty much leaves you with doing something every Sunday.
Yeah, almost every Sunday, yeah. You'll be doing one of those things.
And then do you always have a meal?
Yeah, we usually share an evening meal around 6:30, so.
So what time do you start?
We have our main service start time is at 4:30.
Okay. So you start your main service at 4:30, and then how does your 4:30 in the afternoon?
Yeah.
And then how does, obviously not in the morning.
Yeah, don't know if that'd be worse, but.
That might be interesting.
Yeah.
So how does that flow then? Like, you start with the typical 3 songs and a devotional, or?
Yeah, so the moderator is the one that leads through the flow of the service, and the service usually includes, corporate singing, corporate prayer, corporate scripture memory time, and a children lesson for the children in the main service with the adults present, and then a sermon. So pretty much in that order.
Okay. Does it change up at all?
It does change sometimes. The moderator has some. If it seems like the service is running a little bit long, or the message is going to be a little bit longer, you can maybe cut out the Bible memory or something. I don't know.
So do you have like a testimony time or something like that too?
That we keep mainly for. That's a good point. Actually, we don't really. We have some open time during our communion service, but I guess that's for testimony. I don't know.
Message feedback.
Yeah, message feedback. or sermonettes. No, just kidding. That's not a problem at this church, but that would come after the sermon, obviously. And so usually there's a time for that. Yeah, like a response from the sermon.
You do a message response or something.
Yeah. Keep it under 15 minutes. And I don't know. There was a church I was a part of, and it's like some of the brothers really.
Yeah, I remember.
While they mused, the fire burned.
I remember that growing up. Boy, you'd have an hour message and you thought, wow, okay, we're done with that. And then somebody would decide to add another 15. Well, I don't know if 15 minutes is an exaggeration, actually.
I don't think it is. I know 10 minutes it wouldn't be. Yeah. So.
But yeah, they were evidently pretty inspired.
Yeah, it's good to be inspired.
So what happened, like you're talking about a communion service, that's before your main service.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like top secret.
Top secret? Oh, really?
Or can we, like, what time does that start?
That starts at 3:30. So an hour.
3:30?
Yep.
Okay.
An hour before our main service.
And then you also have like a little service there too.
Yeah. So someone is one of the things that can be let out is that service, and one of the brothers will prepare something to share, whether an exhortation or.
So does he lead the whole communion service?
Yeah.
Then? Okay.
Yep.
Why, from your perspective, are you having communion every Sunday? And is that something that you would have grown up with, or is this something different?
Yeah, communion is something I grew up with, but not every Sunday assembly. So, as far as why, I would say it's a beneficial thing to do. It is benefiting us, I think, and helps us as a congregation, I think, reset at some level for a new week. Obviously, a communion service is a perfect time to think about your relationship to God, and it's a good way to acknowledge and remember Christ's death and his righteousness that he can impute to us as we walk in righteousness ourselves. So it's also a good time for accountability to each other in the church. That's often a missing element, and so I think any opportunity for that is probably a good emphasis. Transparency, confession, just acknowledging our need for Christ is beneficial.
So do you have any other time during the week when you have like accountability meeting or is that?
Yeah.
I don't know if accountability is the right word for that, but
yeah, I mean prayer and accountability. We have a midweek meeting for the men each week, and there's a meeting that's for the ladies every other week. So obviously they're more righteous than we are. They don't need it as often. So, but that's
I was
typical.
thinking that, but I didn't say it.
That's typical. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, every week the men get together, and it's about an hour before work. We usually meet at 6 a.m. in the morning. And it's getting a little bit large right now with the 5 of us. So
yeah,
I think it'd be good to maybe someday have it a smaller group. Maybe 3 or 4 would be ideal. I don't know.
So it's soon to be 6.
Yeah, it'll soon be 6, and I'm not sure if we're gonna split it at that time or not. But I would say we need more prayer, perhaps. Like we need more prayer initiative in those meetings.
So,
but an hour is just not long enough to really
pray.
get too much into it. Yeah.
Well, if you have 5 guys, an hour is not going to be enough to everybody share what's going on.
So we're all going to share. We're all going to pray. So of course you're going to truncate your sharing, and you're going to truncate your praying. So it's a reasonable outcome, but I think it could be tweaked perhaps in the future.
So good question about prayer. Like I've thought about these meetings a lot, trying to like these accountability meetings, or they're kind of, I want to say. So I recently heard that they were started, like they became popular as a result of Promise Keepers. I don't know if you've heard of Promise Keepers,
Yeah.
but Promise Keepers was a big movement back in the 90s, I want to say.
Huh.
Early 2000s, maybe. Huge movement
What I say?
where thousands, like tens of thousands of men would get together and kind of renew their commitment to Christ.
I gotcha.
And that's, I think, from what I understand, that is where those like small group accountability meetings became popular.
Huh.
But I was trying to figure out, like I've really been trying to understand where they, like what is their utility, how do they fit in. Like, I mean, Jesus and his disciples lived together daily, but did Paul and Timothy, like, we have no record of anything like this.
Sure.
There's no New Testament precedent that I know of.
Other than Jesus with his disciples, yeah.
That or the church. I mean, like, the church gathering as a church in communion time.
Yeah.
But as far as this, so that's one thought that I have. But I'm just I'm just processing, trying to figure out how this all works. The other question was, like, it often feels to me like if we have a weekly prayer and we have this weekly sharing get together prayer or whatever it is, do we think about like what are our prayer, like it feels like our prayers aren't big enough. Like it feels like the prayers are more like, me and my problems and my work for today. It kind of feels like it narrows the focus into what I got going on today.
Sure. Huh.
Or this week or whatever. Like,
yeah,
the big focus of, what is God doing in Pittsburgh tends to get trampled down under the cares of daily life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, that's essentially because we have short memories. And so if you're going to go around the room and each one of us share, perhaps in these meetings, what the item of accountability is, perhaps you're sharing about your life, and then you go from that to prayer. Of course, your prayers are going to revolve generally around what you previously talked about. Mm-hmm. So I think this is kind of bleeding into a bigger category, which you already said. Like, in any prayer initiative of any sort, you have to have. God gave us clear thinking minds for a reason. We can think of clear categories for prayer, and so if the objective is accountability, you're probably going to pray about the personal accountability of your brother, or confess your own needs and pray that God helps you to be faithful. And so I would say the tension that you're maybe expressing is potentially could be filled from just other prayer initiatives that can be held in a corporate setting like that.
Because part of my question is, like, do the accountability meetings create more of, like, are they stealing our outward focus? Like,
oh, that way.
Like, not because that they are inherently bad, just because do they inherently make us so introspective that we're not being aggressive and taking new ground and like,
I don't know. That's a worthy thought there. I guess I haven't tended to think of it that way, but that's primarily just because I would regard the desire to be walking in holiness and righteousness is a daily struggle and certainly a weekly one. So why not have a meeting to talk about that? Now, I would just say if there's a lack of an outward focus, there's probably some other things at play, and not like you don't need a fault a good thing for a bad for the lack of an outward focus.
No, not.
I would just say that maybe a better category should be developed for those types of things.
I have just thought about prayers, like we tend to pray for, good things, like not bad things.
Yeah.
But I've just wondered, like, is God honored by what I'm praying for? Like, does he, I don't want to say he doesn't care, but Jesus says, I know you have need of those things. Or the Father knows you have need of those things. Mm-hmm. Okay, at what point do we just say, hey, God, you got that?
Right. Now, an accountability meeting is not potentially really talking about the needs that you're talking about, like food and shelter.
But we do. I mean, like,
sure, we're going to talk about daily life.
because especially as you get older, that tends to be more the things that kind of
bombard your mind.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So you can have something to look forward to.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hector. Oh man.
So yeah, I've
So in some sense, these accountability meetings are one way that we're finding it is a worthy initiative for like personal discipleship. And so that's essentially what we're offering to each other and participating in this meeting as personal discipleship.
Real discipleship.
Now, I would
so
hope.
not just discipleship as in we're going to get together and read a couple Bible verses and then pray for each other and go on the way. It's like,
no, real discipleship, just as it's precedented in the New Testament storyline of Christ and his followers, perhaps, and through the apostles and the people that they were over and spiritual authority. And so, I mean, so I think personal discipleship is something that we should continue to develop. Neither do I feel like we should just be so happy with ourselves we kind of lose it on other fronts. So it's good to stay focused on the call that God has on our lives, and that, you know, an accountability meeting can be a part of that call because it keeps us prepared for the work. But I wouldn't say I really receive like direction for my life from an accountability meeting. I mean, I think that I would more bring that, you know, the direction for my life is going to come from the examples of the brothers and their counsel, but it's not really, the focus is accountability and walking in purity and all those things, which I think is worthy of an hour per week.
So do you have any other midweek meetings at all?
Once a month we do a Wednesday night where we do our book study generally.
Okay, that was the Screw Tape Letters.
Yeah, so we just finished it. Yep. Yeah, I would actually have a desire for more involvement as a church body, some intentional initiative, probably a prayer meeting, I would think.
Besides your Thursday morning or Wednesday morning? Or...
Like, you need more than an hour for 5 guys, and spontaneous prayer with a with a broader focus, I think, would be helpful to an outward focus. And I don't know when that might develop, but my wife and I are praying to that end. So
you do have a prayer meeting. I say a prayer meeting, a prayer time, a corporate prayer time, incorporated into your Sunday service.
Yeah.
How long is that?
Very short. Just like 3 brothers pray, and it's probably 8.5 minutes.
So have you done any actual corporate prayer, like where everybody prays?
That's a good question. Yeah, we're pretty underdeveloped, brother. We're pretty green. See that glass? So,
No, I found that so fascinating. Like, the when I was, so several brothers had kind of, we have a similar service pattern.
Okay.
Not exactly the same, but similar. And during our prayer time, it was usually just, 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 brothers would pray.
Yeah.
Or sisters, but usually brothers. And it was just kind of, it was a great time. I enjoyed it. Good. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I'm not just there listening to the other people praying. I'm usually there using that time to pray myself.
Sure. Yeah.
So I thought it was a great time.
Yeah.
But several people were like, this is kind of a weird way to do this. You just have several guys pray, and it doesn't seem like it's a very edifying time. And
okay.
So there's kind of there's been some question about whether the prayer time is structured the best it could be. so several brothers were using what's sometimes called African style of praying.
Okay.
If they were moderating, where everybody prays.
Okay, gotcha.
And I found that like, oh, that was terribly uncomfortable. Like,
Gotcha.
it is like the worst way to pray. Because I can pray quite well if I'm just there.
Yeah.
If one person is talking, but if 20 or 30 people are talking, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
And so I decided, and then I was looking at studying some of the early church writings about something else, about their service actually, and discovered that in their services that they were having people get too rowdy during prayer time.
Oh, funny.
I was like, wow, that's kind of neat. Like, I can go for a rowdy prayer time.
Too rowdy.
But what was happening
They were getting bored.
is they were doing a corporate prayer time,
Okay.
and everybody was praying.
Huh.
So when everybody was praying, then some of them were getting even. They were kind of, I guess,
Getting animated.
yeah, making sure that everybody heard. I don't know how this was all working. Like,
Gotcha.
we don't have any videos,
It's too bad.
but
Yeah.
but there were the elders were definitely complaining a little bit that
Yeah.
they needed to tone it down. It was getting too rowdy. So
I see.
I am really looking forward to getting too rowdy of a prayer time.
Sure. Despite your impressions of the rowdy prayer time being a little dysfunctional.
Well, I mean, we could get a lot more rowdy before we got in trouble.
Okay, sure. But I'm just saying you didn't say that you preferred it.
Oh, anyway, no, I didn't like it. But once I discovered that, I was like, well, you know what? That explains several things.
Mm-hmm.
So one is I don't know if you've wrestled with this as much as we have or not, but women, the verse that says women are to be silent in church.
Okay.
Okay. Well, how does that work? Like, how are they going to pray if they're going to be silent? It doesn't say be silent except to sing and to pray. It says to be silent.
Uh-huh.
So we naturally make the exception that singing is almost has to include singing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it almost has to exclude singing.
Sure.
But then prayer is something that's kind of it seems like it's been on the line.
Okay, yeah.
But if we did corporate prayer, then you have the same thing where there is no. If a woman is praying by herself in a corporate setting, then you have that same problem.
Yeah.
You're back to, when should a woman speak in church? Well, if everybody's speaking, just like everybody's praying, everybody's singing, then all of a sudden it becomes a non-issue.
I see. Huh. I've never thought about that before.
So I was like, wow, okay. This could actually explain two different things.
Yeah.
Your prayer time being corporate prayer, not just one or two people praying, and also you would have. You don't have to wrestle with the question of when should a woman lead out in prayer, because everybody's praying.
Yeah, gotcha.
It becomes a non-issue.
Yeah, I've participated in some of that type of praying, but yeah, I haven't had too many thoughts about it, honestly. Have you started to do that?
I have I have now that whenever it's my turn to moderate, I try to remember to do that because I feel like as much as I don't like it, I think it's the right way to do it.
I say, great.
So,
breaking some new ground.
I'm actually starting to enjoy it. I'm starting to learn. Starting to appreciate its function.
Sure.
It's not our normal North American way of praying, but I think it just makes more sense. The other thing is it redeems the time.
Sure.
Because instead of having some people thinking about prayer requests and some people, a couple other people praying, it's like you got 20 or 30 people all praying at the same time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Exactly. Yeah, just tear it up.
We've compounded this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Essentially, when there's some one person praying, a lot of people would say that you're just supposed to agree in prayer with them, and so essentially you're praying as well. But yeah,
and no, I enjoy listening to somebody that's good at praying.
That's good. God help us.
I love like for me, that's always been a part of the experience. Is
sure. Listen to their eloquent prayer or whatever. Yeah.
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 But maybe that's one of those things that you just need to give up. I mean, just because I enjoy it don't make it right.
Sure. Doesn't make it wrong either.
Well, it doesn't, but could.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, I've been having this desire for like someone to pray with for a while. So I've actually found someone that now weekly I have a phone call with and pray with. So that's been going well.
Okay. Technology.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're not gonna get away from it, so we might as well live with technology.
Right. Might as well embrace it. So what are you looking for in a prayer partner? Are you looking for? I mean, are you looking to pray for broader stuff? Are you looking to what's your objective?
Well, honestly, mentorship in this case.
Okay.
So yeah, myself being mentored and the opportunity for just an outside voice for life. One thing I've been observing from the examples of those I've been observing is, well, there's that scripture that says, in the multitude of counselors, there is safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, well, there's also a Chinese proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And in some ways, the counsel is the way we can go with others. Now, it's not like we're going to always be with someone else in every life endeavor, but I think the counsel of the brotherhood, whether a local brotherhood or a broader brotherhood, should definitely have a place in the believer's life. And I would say if anyone finds themselves not pursuing the counsel of others, that should probably be alarming, because we can so much easier be just tempted to go our own way, and half of my good ideas are actually bad ideas. So just figuring all that out is also something that I need an outside voice for. And yeah, it's a good time to pray together. And there's a scripture that says, of course, we're supposed to bear each other's burdens, and if we don't know what each other's burdens are, we're not going to be able to bear them. So, usually you learn about your brother's burdens through relationship, obviously. And so I would love to see more engagement in relationship and counsel and mentorship like that happen. I feel like just as the devil wants us to feel alone when we're living a life of sin, is the same way he wants us to feel alone even if we're attempting the Christian life. And so one good way we can just kick the door off the hinges is by calling people. And I've actually been a part of a accountability group just a little bit. It's not a Anabaptist ministry at all, but it's kind of like a accountability group for drug and alcohol abuse and the like. And that's one thing that they were talking about a lot is supporting each other. Like if someone's feeling like they're falling into a temptation, it's like, yeah, who are you going to call at that moment? And I feel like it's a good word for even just people like you and I we're doing okay some days and not so okay the other days, and great some days and terrible other days. And so we need stability, and I know we find our stability in Christ, but I think we can support each other if we're willing to enter into a relationship. And I don't know, I'm still developing some of my own philosophies regarding the situation. And guys honestly find it kind of hard, and I'm not going to speak for women, but guys it seems that guys find it easier to be loners rather than in beneficial relationships. So
well, it's odd, because I know guys that are really close to their blood brothers, but not very close to anybody else.
Okay.
But you're thinking about people with relational difficulties. It seems like as men get older, most of us tend not to make a lot of new friends. Like,
Right.
we use the friends that we had, we stay fairly, I don't know if close is the right word or not, but we usually kind of, the friends that we made when we were in our 20s kind of
Right.
stick with us.
Yeah.
But as we get older, we don't usually make many new friends.
Yeah. That's a problem. I feel.
So older guys tend to, their friends move on or get mad at them or die off or something. And then,
Yeah.
so older guys do tend to be way more alone.
Yeah.
I think that's...
So one thing I've faced is I do have friends that are my age in my peer group that I'm friends with, but I have a lot of other friends that aren't really walking with the Lord to this day. And so it's like, I mean, I'm not really pursuing, a very meaningful relationship with them at this point. And so I feel like I've needed to diversify and, pursue relationships within the faithful body of Christ where I can hopefully be a benefit and be benefited by, and a mutually benefiting relationship can come forth from that. So
You said you don't speak for the women much, but you have, 4 sisters there in your church?
yeah.
I guess not really any youth girls. Just maybe one.
Yeah.
She's not.
Most
youth
of the
yet.
children are, all the children are under the age of 19, so the oldest being 18. So there's not a super strong youth culture yet, but
What is that? One of the problems with new churches is that the guys are all gung ho about, hey, we're gonna go start a new church and yippee, and the women are like, leaving all their friends and their moms behind.
right.
How does that play out?
Well, it plays out in the fact of, it seems like most of us guys have wives that have similar personalities.
Okay.
So they're a little, tend to be a little more introverted. So, there's not, yeah. I think they're processing it all in a good way.
Wait a minute.
But
Your wives all have the similar personalities,
Yeah.
or they have similar personalities as you do?
no, they don't have similar personalities as it pertains
Okay.
to guys, but spice and rice. So they all tend to be the
Okay.
rice that are stable, but maybe not as
Okay.
relationally driven. And so they're still figuring out how to do this whole thing of church with people that they didn't previously know for that long. And and learning how to adjust to a city lifestyle they probably pay for it the most, I would say. But we all still have good marriages. It's not like any of our wives have left us yet. So,
Well, it's not like we're looking for that to happen either. So so I guess you probably can't speak much for the rest of the families, but do your wives, are they able to reach back into their culture they came from, back to their home moms, parents?
well, to varying degrees, I would say the younger mothers would my wife and another one of the wives would probably be more or less the most connected to their mothers, as it were, and their families. And the 2 others are a bit older and a slight bit more established, and so we're probably more stable moving to the city and rely less on their families for support. But
What about childcare? Do your parents, do you have people come out and help? You recently had a baby. Did somebody come help you with that? Or?
oh yeah, we have been receiving help from our families, from actually both sides in our instance. So
Which is, that's a big, until you're somewhere where you don't have that,
right.
you don't realize how big of a culture blessing that is.
Yeah.
Because if you think about being away from family, then having to take care of like we're so used to multi-generational families that we don't realize that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We do tend to take it for granted. I mean, I would think if you ever were a full-time missionary in a foreign context, you would pretty soon realize the deficit.
Yeah, because we faced that. So when we moved here, it was almost all young families.
Okay.
Like everybody was in their 30s except for my parents, I
Wow.
think, or 20s.
Huh.
So we have like this whole,
Yeah.
like just kind of this little slice of 30-something families.
Yeah.
The oldest children were, 11, 12, 10. And so it wasn't like you could leave children with their siblings.
Right.
It wasn't like you could drop them off at somebody else's house when you're having a members meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're having a members meeting, everybody's going to be there.
Children included.
So what do you do with 30 children?
Yeah, I don't know.
So it was definitely, and there's a huge blessing in having a mixed
Sure.
mixed age group to where you have older teens and you
Yeah.
have couples that are older and couples that are younger, and
Yeah.
it makes a big difference in church culture, because it was really stressful because you might have had people around, but like we had cafe workers, but they weren't really excited about getting 30 children for a couple hours either. So
Yeah. Understandably.
there's just small things like that matter a lot in the culture.
Yeah. When church planting efforts are being organized, I think that's something to consider. I've observed the example of a church actually somewhat close to here, and it seems as if I don't know if they directly invited an older couple, but it seems as though they definitely made it very obvious to this older couple. And so now I think it's good to have, when your parents, you already mentioned, I mean, they I guess were an older couple for this church plant, however many years ago that was. So I think it's certainly a consideration. And yeah, you're right. I mean, having a single generation, or like my wife has said before, it's like there's just too many little ones. I mean, like there's just too many babies, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sad admission, and especially when you go to churches where it's just like all old people, it feels like a funeral home.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. To me, give me 30 children and 5 adults. Oh, well, we might have 6 adults. But I would rather not get anything out of the service than have a peaceful, formal service with no children.
Sure, yeah.
I just don't. I don't think there's any excuse for wishing there were no children. And well, I understand the problem
Right.
very well.
Yeah.
For 15 years, I probably didn't get a lot out of many church services,
Sure.
just because you got little children and they don't ever decide to yell until the message. And, then either somebody's got to. If you're teaching them to be quiet, they don't learn that the first Sunday.
Right.
If you're taking them out, you're going to be out pretty regular.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. But it can get really hard when you have, or really, I don't know, hard's the right word. It gets pretty weird when you're having a church service with 5 families and you have, at least one half of all the couples out with a child.
Wow, has that happened?
I notice it happening, not much anymore.
Okay.
But 5 or 6 years ago, when we all had little children,
Yeah.
and no older children,
Yeah.
it was pretty often that a good part of the church is outside taking care of little children. So
Wow. Yeah.
it's kind of hard to have a service like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we've experienced that maybe as much, but you'd be surprised though. The whole thing could switch on you. Then you'll pretty soon be the more mature church with a big youth group, and then you'll be wondering what to do with all the youth energy.
Well, we're headed that way quick, but I mean, and you talk about old couples, like trying to plant a church with a range is almost impossible.
Sure, yeah.
Because nobody once you hit 40, your zeal for doing something different starts halving every year.
Oh boy.
Not quite.
But yeah, huh.
It seems like people become way more stable as they.
Yeah.
So the stability that you need is impossible to get because it has gelled somewhere else.
Yeah.
So the only way to get that stability is to go there, age there, and then gel.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
Are you in the gelling process?
I'm trying to keep that stirred up.
Okay, sure.
Trying not to gel too much. No, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Like we tried for years. I mean, probably 4 or 5 years to get more older couples to move in here.
Okay.
And like specifically, not just hoping and praying, like specifically asking couples if they would move here. And then took one look at us and said, "What? Us there? Nope."
I don't blame them.
No, they all had legitimate reasons why.
Sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So you have no youth. You have 3 over 16 or 2 over 16? 4.
Let's see. Over 16.
Yeah.
Maybe 3.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
So 3 over 16. So you're a long ways from a real youth group.
Yeah.
A real youth group.
Depends on how you classify youth. I mean, you can take 16 or 11 or 12.
The age tends to mix a lot more when you have a smaller group.
Yeah.
And any youth specific activities yet?
My wife and I have actually done a few.
You don't count as youth. You're a little bit. I mean, once you're married, you're not youth anymore.
Well, I'm saying we've initiated a few
Okay.
youth-specific activities, but yeah. Other than that, I don't know. There's not been too much.
Nothing formal.
Nothing formal planned. Yeah, we should actually do some more of that. Honestly, there was one time I think my brother-in-law was visiting, and there was just some extra people around, and yeah, if you pull them all together and make sure everyone comes, there can be a slight bit of a formidable group. But yeah.
Do y'all host like there are youth groups that come out there to sing and pass out tracts and stuff? Do y'all host them at all?
We don't participate in that work. I don't know why, but they have their own program, and we haven't really been very useful to them at this point. So I guess they'll just continue doing their thing, and we'll continue doing
So there's no
thing.
cross-pollination whatsoever?
No.
I thought maybe I think there was some talk about there was some questions about whether there should be interaction, but
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's one thing that is interesting here too, is that we have lots of youth coming and going because we're at the crossroads of PA, I guess.
Okay.
But we don't have that many youth where we have much youth activity.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's gonna be a problem. I mean, like, how would you have felt growing up in a church with, if you were the oldest youth, and there were 3 of you, or was that your experience?
No, it wasn't. I don't know how I'd have felt.
Like, is that a legitimate reason for not doing a small church plant?
Well, I don't know. I guess, is it not legitimate to be in a foreign context where there's not other like-minded believers, perhaps? that might answer the foreign endeavors, might answer our domestic endeavors.
Well, if you see, I mean, a lot of what I'm seeing come from the foreign field is people are saying they're moving back because of their youth.
Okay.
So you don't like, are you gonna use that same?
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. I guess I've not heard that as much, but not saying it's not true. I would think that a vision, if someone has a vision for church planting, I think that vision should include the foreign context. And what I mean by that is, I think there's a lot of missions that are foreign, but there's not as many church plants that are being very successful at different times. And that's often because not many people are willing to move very far from home.
Well, that's the youth thing is something that I think is vital. Like, I mean, I think it is definitely worth consideration because I don't think it should keep anybody from doing it. But if we don't have a way for our youth to interact with other youth, then it becomes maybe I think it can add an unnecessary element of danger to your whole church plant.
And what's the danger there?
Of your youth just deciding that there's nothing here for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I mean, I don't know. There wasn't a very strong youth culture where I grew up.
Well, you don't necessarily need to have a strong youth culture. You just need to have other youth.
You're just saying you need to have some connectivity or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess generational gaps are always going to be present and threatening. Yeah. Ultimately, if you could start to remove some of those generational gaps, it'd probably be helpful. Smaller churches do help with that generational gap.
They do, but you're never going to remove the fact that young people are looking for partners, whether they're actively or passively.
Well, they can find their partners at yearly conferences and such.
They can if there are yearly conferences.
Oh yeah, 100%. There definitely are.
Or I mean, I guess.
And Bible schools, nonetheless.
Yeah, but there again, you're
go to 3 Bible schools a year and 3 church conferences a year and a revival meeting, and you'll be good.
Wow, you're getting kind of aggressive there.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Is that how you found your wife?
That's Yep, very successful. So,
okay. So, was that the formula you used?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I never got to the desperate stage, but
okay.
I've heard of some young guys going to 4 Bible schools a year.
Huh.
Yeah, I only did.
Is that what Bible schools are for?
Pretty much.
Like, I never went to Bible school.
Yeah, well, you've been spared.
Okay.
But no, my wife and I met at a church conference. Yeah. So, I mean, my whole life I've went to revival meetings or church conferences, and I think that's a good time for youth from varying regions, to get to know each other and observe the older generation putting on a spiritual time that can be beneficial to all.
Yeah. So, what do you think about church? So were these meetings set up by your church conference, by your church affiliation, or were you just going to random meetings?
So growing up, there was a yearly, it was like protracted meetings. I don't know if they would have called it.
Was it like Kingdom Fellowship Weekend?
Well, no, I'm going before that. So there was.
But it wasn't something like that. I was
kind of like that. But it was the local church that I was a part of was big enough or stable enough or had the desire enough, I don't know, to host this whole big meeting. Okay. People would travel in, and it was a whole week long in the evenings, or how was it? And then it would kind of finish with a strong weekend or something like that. But yeah, at one point the church owned tents, and they would yearly put this whole thing together and record the sermons, and that was quite an effort, and then that kind of fizzled out. And then I participated in yearly revival meetings that were hosted by the local fellowship church, and then in more later years I've went to Kingdom Fellowship, which is the meeting I was a part of, which I previously referenced. So yeah. So yeah, I think church conferences are a good thing. Pulling a big group of people together, I think, is always. I'm somewhat outward focused, and I enjoy a relationship like that, and so I like being around lots of people. So for a time.
So a church conference or a Bible school or something like that would attract youth from various places.
Yeah.
So, because that's one of the problems that we have, or I don't know if it's a problem or not, but I think it's a problem of a lot of our little unaffiliated churches don't have a strong network.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have a strong reason to meet with other people. If you put on a conference in Pittsburgh, then why would we show up? Like, unless we just wanted to, like.
Right.
So I grew up. We had church conference meetings that you were supposed to go to. Like, it was kind of more of it wasn't a total requirement, but it was kind of like,
okay,
you were kind of expected to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that was put on regionally by our church fellowship, which was, there was 20 or 30 churches in the fellowship.
Yeah.
And like our 4 or 5 regional churches there would each have their own little conference. And sometimes you'd go to a different region. You'd go to their conference meeting.
Yeah.
And yeah, they got joked about as being like Heels and Deals, or
okay,
a place where you.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I mean, that's not what.
Sure. Yeah.
It was a place for youth to get together.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think there can be interconnectedness without the structure of a conference, but some people from conferences criticize that it's like, well, you're essentially just creating your own quasi-conference, and it's like, well, I don't think a conference is a bad thing, so I don't see that a remark like that is a threat. I mean...
So you're okay with the conference?
I mean, for some people it seems like the best thing.
Well, not you, or what?
What's that?
I said for some people, but not you?
I don't know. I mean, not for me as of yet.
Yeah,
but
okay.
If God would call me to a certain fellowship that was a part of a conference, I'd probably be fine with it. I don't know.
One of the benefits of a conference is that it gives you somewhat of a safety, because everybody that you're meeting with is similar to yourself. Where you go to something like Kingdom Fellowship Weekend, there is quite a wide variety.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the variety can be a little bit mind-stretching,
sure.
Which I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it's not just it's kind of one of those things we're talking about, our animal patterns, where you can just go automatically do something and ignore it, versus when you're going somewhere that is very diverse, you can't just run in there on autopilot and expect to come out healthy. Like, you could.
Depends on how much other people affect you.
You do need to pay attention to what's going on.
Sure, yeah.
Which I think is great.
Yeah, there's nothing essentially healthy about only ever running with, birds of a feather flock together. So great. I mean, the feather is supposed to be our white flag of surrender to Christ. And so I think there's nothing extra special about just wanting to be with people that are just like us. There is something to be said for cultural diversity, and even in the differences that we experience in this life, I think there's something to be appreciated in all those differences. And those differences, if we can ever, we'll probably have to lay down some of our differences, but as we follow Christ, I think we can find a unity. And Kingdom Fellowship, I think, kind of portrays that a little bit, like all these differences, and yet all these people for some reason want to be together. So
yeah, no, I love that. To me, it's like it's the biggest mix of different people. Like it's a huge mix of,
Right.
but at the same time, they're all there because they care about the kingdom,
Yeah.
and that makes it usually, no matter what they look like on the outside,
Right.
they're usually kind of thinking in the same general direction, which I think is really neat. Well, is there anything else we should have talked about that we didn't?
I don't know. Any questions for or suggestions for where I'm at in life? The words of the wise.
Words of the wise. No, I love your zeal. I really, yeah, a young guy dragging his vulnerable family into the ghettos of Pittsburgh is just amazing.
Well, yeah.
I'm inspired. Like, I wish I could do that, but I'm kind of,
Yeah.
I guess I'm out here with the fearful.
I'm not saying this.
No,
is
I'm not really, but I do really think I think that's great. Like, I love seeing that. I think it's worth a lot, because I feel like we're on the edge. We're quivering on the edge of, I want to say a massive, not a revival, but a shift where young people are getting tired of stagnant,
lethargy.
of lethargy, and they are seeing laziness, and a lot of them are choosing the other. I'm going to say the majority are choosing to go with something that's more exciting, that looks like it's more movement, and is usually not a good direction.
Sure. Yeah.
So I really love seeing a wise excitement.
Sure. Yeah.
Joining a new church plant is a whole lot better than going off and doing something else that's wild and
Wonderful.
not very useful.
Sure. Yeah.
Because young people need to chase. I mean, they need something to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, 100%.
And I love to see that energy going into a new church.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. Give God the glory from my life for sure. I want to live a life that's worthy of being replicated. I mean, I think that's the example that we glean from the apostles in the New Testament for sure. And yeah, a new church plant does take a lot of effort, and so I think some of your work and trying to help people get excited about church planting is excellent. I mean, surely from the fact that an intentional church plant is extremely beneficial to the kingdom and also to the congregants that choose to move.
Yeah.
So I hope my life can be a testimony to that fact. And God is faithful. I mean, whatever He's calling you into, He's gonna lead you through it, whatever that might be. I don't know how long we'll live in Pittsburgh. I don't know. We'll be there for the foreseeable future. So yeah, just keep trusting the Lord, and yeah, I'm grateful for the journey. God has been good to us.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for coming on, and
Yeah.
hopefully it'll be an inspiration to some other
Yeah.
young
perhaps.
guys to go out there and
Tear it up.
grab a wife and find a church plant.
All right. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet.
Thank you for listening. If you find value in these conversations, please share them with others. Now go set the world on fire.